So, with the Switch 2 now over a week old, it made me realize that it's probably the perfect time for me to finally make a video talking about Metroid. It is crazy exciting to me to know that I have the console and the device that I will be playing the next Metroid game on, and the next Metroid Prime game on. I think that's an important distinction as well. It's both the next game in the Metroid franchise, but it's also a sequel to Metroid Prime 3. This is a sequel 18 years in the making. It feels crazy impossible. But we're basically here with the Switch 2 in hand. I know this is where I'm going to play this game that I've been waiting for so long. And yes, of course, we all know Metroid Prime 4 Beyond is also coming to the original Nintendo Switch. It was announced for the original Nintendo Switch 8 years ago in 2017 when the Switch was brand spanking new, before the game entered the most insane version of development hell we've almost ever seen. But here we are, and whether it's the Switch 1 version or the Switch 2 version, this game is slowly creeping up on releasing, because they've told us it's going to release in 2025, and I'm choosing to still believe that it's going to stick to that date. But there is a Switch 2 specific element to Metroid Prime 4 that I want to discuss in this video, and that of course has to do with the newly introduced mouse functionality due to the Switch 2 Joy-Cons and the fact that they have a mouse capability when playing any kind of game, first-person, party game, mini-game, whatever. And this is something that is really super exciting to me. And during the Nintendo Treehouse after the Switch 2 Direct in April, they even showed off Metroid Prime 4 using the mouse Joy-Cons, and it got my mouth watering. I think this is the coolest concept. I am all about trying this brand new Metroid game in a whole new way. So I've spent some time now, in this past week since the Switch 2 released, toying around a little bit with the mouse feature of the Joy-Cons here, the Joy-Con 2s, and there's a lot I like, there's a lot to be excited about, but I'm also still a little bit nervous on how practical it's actually going to be for me to play this new Metroid game that, like I said, we've been waiting 18 years for, using these as a mouse. One of the cool things about the mouse controls being introduced for Metroid Prime 4 is the fact that it's not actually the first time Nintendo has used a Metroid game, and specifically a Metroid Prime game, to fully feature and focus on whatever the new control gimmick is for that platform. I'm of course talking about Metroid Prime 3 Corruption, released on the Nintendo Wii, which was a huge showcase for the very new Wii Remote and Nunchuck and motion pointer controls and pointer shooting gameplay. And it was very successful in my opinion. Even though Prime 3 is my least favorite of the 3 console Prime games, I still love the game, and at the time, the incredible graphics and the awesome motion controls were like next level. Now, you of course had to adjust a little bit, but back in 2006 and back in the Wii era, and 2007 I should say, which is when Prime 3 actually released, when we were all kind of playing our Nintendo games using the Wii Remote and Nunchuck, I think we were a little bit more adapted and accustomed to using them. So it's like going back to using the Wii Remote for Metroid Prime 3 now might feel a little bit more cumbersome than it did in 2007, because that was the primary Nintendo controller that we were all playing with at the time. And so Prime 3 showcased the Wii's Wii Remote and pointer controls for first-person Metroid gameplay. And then, heck, even Metroid Prime Hunters on the DS was doing the same thing by showcasing the touchscreen. So it's another version of a Metroid game, and coincidentally a Metroid Prime game, that was saying, here is the main unique kind of controlling gimmick to our platform, a Wii Remote or a touchscreen, and this is how you're going to play Samus in first person on this device. And so, when we see that Metroid Prime 4 Beyond is now using the brand new Switch 2's mouse feature to control in first person, kind of emulating how you can play first persons, of course, on a PC with a mouse and keyboard, it is very exciting. It's also very Nintendo, and as I just mentioned, it matches up with some of the previous things they've done with Metroid Prime games in the past. One thing I want to make sure that I do call out in this video is that even though this is probably going to seem very obvious and like common knowledge to a lot of us, I do still think it's important for me to mention it. The mouse controls for Metroid Prime 4 are only going to be optional. They're going to be one of several options of control schemes. In fact, Metroid Prime Remastered, I believe, set the template for what we can expect. I'd wager to say that every single control option in Metroid Prime Remastered, plus the mouse controls for the Switch 2, will be available to play the game in. So, it's worth noting that there's a great chance that long term, I very likely might end up sticking with and relying on just using the Pro Controller and dual analog controls. For Metroid Prime 4, I think it worked fantastically for Prime Remastered, even though I'm an old nostalgic guy who does love the awkward GameCube controls, and I also love using motion and gyro controls, whether I'm using it also with the Pro Controller or even with the two Joy-Cons individually. But for the rest of this video, what I'm really just doing is discussing how it could work or how it couldn't work based on my setup in my house for using the mouse controls, simply because it's one of the unique Switch 2 new features being added to Metroid Prime 4. Only available on the Switch 2, only available using the Switch 2 Joy-Cons or the Joy-Con 2s. It's one of the, I think, benefits of playing the next-gen version of Metroid Prime 4 on top of the better visuals and performance and all of that. It's the potential and the option of using these cool mouse controls, which, if they work, they're probably going to be awesome. And if they don't work, it's going to be an option none of us want to use. And so, as somebody who loved and enjoyed Metroid Prime 3 when it was brand new, using the Wii Remote and Nunchuck pointer controls, and who also loved and enjoyed Metroid Prime Hunters when it was brand new, using the DS and the touchscreen and all the different ways you can control Samus using that, I want to believe in these Joy-Con mouse controls for playing the brand new Metroid Prime 4 game. It's a brand new console with a brand new feature for the controller, and Metroid Prime 4 will showcase that feature. But will it work the way I want? Well, I, like many of us, have been testing some of the mouse functionality of these Joy-Cons in this week since the Switch 2 released, and I've been doing it via two different games, probably the same two games most of us have tried it on, which is the Welcome Tour game, because I did download that and I have tried that, and then, of course, the better comparison title, which is Cyberpunk 2077. I mentioned many months ago after the Switch 2 was first revealed how I was excited for the mouse controls, and I knew that Metroid Prime 4 was going to use them even before Nintendo confirmed it. I think we all suspected it and I discussed it, but I also discussed at that time my nerves for how I could play any kind of first-person game, especially Metroid Prime 4, being the biggest Metroid fan on the planet, using mouse controls while sitting on my couch in my living room. And so, you know, I did a couple of tests, and I have some footage here. I'm showing you what the living room where I do all of my gaming and we watch all of our movies. This is kind of like our secondary sort of like man cave living room is sort of what I would call it, even though it's not in the basement. We just have a one-story house, but it's like our secondary living room. But it's got the bigger TV, the surround sound, and these comfy couches for leaning back. You can see it looks like about, I don't know, I would say 10 feet from where the TV is to where you are sitting on the couch, right? And it's a great space for playing games on your TV, which is how I play all of my consoles, including my Switch. You've heard me say it. I'm mostly a TV player and a docked player with my Switch and my Switch 2 so far. And so how could you sit in a room like this, for example, which is how most people will play docked Switch games? How can you sit in this kind of a setup and comfortably use a mouse-like control to play a first-person game like Metroid Prime 4? I have some other footage of examples in me testing out these controls that I'll show you in a minute, but, you know, to recap what I've said, I've always had nerves about sitting back, and if this is your mouse, which, by the way, I do want to point out, personally, using the wrist straps here that kind of add the ability for the Joy-Cons to feel like a mouse and slide around, it does make a huge difference. You can still use the mouse feature, obviously, without keeping the wrist straps on, but I have found that the wrist straps are actually pretty darn great. This is the best way to use these things as a computer mouse, for sure. And so I've always had the concern about leaning back and where's my hand? Is it here? Is it, you know, on my knee, on a couch cushion, up here on the arm of my couch? Do people need a tray? People keep suggesting these like little lap tray things that people can use, whatever the case may be. You know, somebody who might sit at a computer desk like I'm sitting right now and have their Switch docked, hooked up to like a small TV or a computer monitor at a desk, of course, this would be a great way to try it. A lot of people play first-person games using a regular mouse, sitting at a computer, and that's what they're doing, and that's great. I actually played Skyrim that way back in 2011 on the PC. So that's kind of my real experience with a first-person game using a mouse. And I loved it at the time. It worked really, really well. But again, playing on a TV, using a home console, but also a mouse, it's different when you're doing this. And so playing Cyberpunk, which is a first-person shooter that's a great comparison for how Metroid Prime 4 might actually feel, this was my test for understanding how feasible and comfortable will it be for me to sit on my couch 10 feet away, leaning back and relaxing, nothing sitting on my lap, no TV tray in front of me, to play Metroid Prime 4 with these Joy-Con mouse controls. So this is about what it looks like when I'm sitting on my couch, looking up at my big TV, playing a video game, watching a movie, whatever, with the two Joy-Cons in my hand here. But I've mentioned before my coffee table scenario, which is like in front of me here, and you can see what does it look like for me. And I'm not even using a mouse pad yet. This is me just trying it on the table. Look at how not feasible or comfortable this would be to use a coffee table that might be sitting in front of anyone in any house that we all have. And granted, everyone's room setup is going to be different. I'm only showing you mine because I'm talking about my experience and what I expect. This is not a comfortable way to be playing a video game for hours on end. Leaning forward, hunched forward. You know, it just doesn't make sense. I try it with a mouse pad, and I only do this to help myself realize that the mouse feature of the Joy-Con reacts and responds better to a mouse pad, in my experience, than the coffee table. And maybe that's because my coffee table might be different than your coffee table, so again, nobody knows. But this is one way to do it, but this ain't feasible. There ain't no way that I'm doing this. Some people have talked about using it on the cushion next to you, like right next to where you're sitting. So I tried this position, and this is not great. This is not how I want to play a game either. Now, it's a lot better than leaning forward for sure, but it just doesn't feel right. And it's just a little bit, I don't know, it just feels a little bit goofy. It's not also where and how I sit. I sit in that other seat all the way to my right on the left of your screen with the couch arm right next to me, and that's how I like to play and sit. So I tried doing it using the arm of the couch as if I was sitting here comfortably like so. And this is actually theoretically more comfortable than sitting in the middle and using the cushion down where I'm sitting. But still, this isn't the best using just the couch cushion itself. And so this takes me to what I think is actually the best way that I've discovered to try playing a first-person shooter using the mouse controls. And it's the same way using the couch arm, but I just put a mouse pad here. And so this is what it looks like. Me playing Cyberpunk and doing some shooting and some action. Now, keep in mind, my gameplay isn't the best because I'm still adjusting to using a Joy-Con as a mouse for shooter controls. So you can, judge how accurate or inaccurate I may seem. And also, I've noticed that using the Joy-Con as a mouse, it's a little bit tricky and kind of uncomfortable. Like, your hand kind of cramps up. You have to get your thumb and your fingers in a very awkward position using this tiny little Joy-Con, even though they're a lot bigger than the prior ones, because you have to use the face buttons like X and Y to change your gun or to reload while also trying to aim and be accurate. And it's an interesting experience. And so again, don't judge the gameplay because this is only like the third time I've even tried using the mouse controls for Cyberpunk for any sort of extended period of time. But this so far seems to be the best way for me to play a first-person game. It is not perfect. It's not ideal for a variety of reasons, like I said, but it certainly gets the job done for the most part. So again, I said this while discussing that footage, and I wish I said it earlier in the video, but I want to remind you that everyone's setup is different. So the only reason I showed you the room that I play in, my man cave living room setup for video games and for movies, and showed you some of the different versions and ways and positions I would be sitting in and places for me to test it, is because it's unique to me and my household and how my gaming setup is done. Yours is going to be different. Every single person will have a different setup, so you might have something that's a little bit more feasible. You might be playing at a computer desk. And you might not even be using these things as a mouse at all. Obviously, that's very much likely for a lot of folks. But for me, as a diehard Metroid fan, waiting for Metroid Prime 4 Beyond for so long, incredibly excited, and I want to try the premier next-generation control scheme that they have incorporated into this game. I'm really concerned with how comfortable I'll be able to be when playing this game and trying these mouse controls. Now, I'll be honest, I'm going to commit in the beginning to trying it the way I did, where I'm sitting back and I'm doing this, and you saw from the footage, this is about where my arm would be sitting, and I'd be playing with the mouse pad right here on the couch arm, looking up at my TV. You know, I'd be doing like this. And you saw me playing Cyberpunk. It worked. It was fine. But I don't know, even just doing it for like 5 minutes when trying to capture some of that footage, 5 or 10 minutes, it doesn't feel comfortable for that long. In theory, you'd want to be able to kind of rest like here. And using motion controls, like I still play Wii games on my Wii U on that exact same TV in that same room, you can kind of sit here. I don't know if you can see it. If my hands are in my lap here, and I have the Wii, this is a Wii remote and not a Joy-Con, and I'm using the sensor bar, you can do this, and I can play Metroid Prime 3 pretty well. And then sometimes you got to do the pump and this or whatever, but this is fine. But in general, I can kind of relax and still do motion controls, and it works. The mouse thing requires something very different. You're down, you're leaning forward, you're doing this, you're doing whatever. You just need a surface. It's very, very different. And I mentioned it earlier too. Some people have suggested these like lap pads that I guess exist for using a mouse. I might look into that, but I don't know that I want to have to buy some additional device or piece of plastic or thing just to play this game. You know, even though it's Metroid and it's the most important game I can think of, it just feels, I don't know, kind of silly and goofy and like a waste. I'd like to be able to just play the game as I get it, in its case, pop it into my Switch 2, use whatever control setup I prefer, whether it's the Joy-Cons, whether it's the Pro Controller or whatever, motion, mouse, who knows, and just play it that way out of the box and enjoy it for what it is. So these are some of my thoughts. This is a look at what my gaming setup looks like and the ways that I tested playing first-person Cyberpunk with the Joy-Con 2 mouse controls and trying to envision how that will then apply to Metroid Prime 4 Beyond when that comes out. And so, like I said, I'm going to commit in the beginning to trying it the way you saw me doing it in the footage I had, where I'm just using the couch arm, but it might not be something comfortable enough for me to stick to. Because this is comfortable for a time, but not forever. Eventually, you want to be able to be chilling, like I was showing you, with your hands just kind of in your lap as if you were holding a controller. So, I don't mind making some small sacrifices to using Nintendo's unique control schemes. Again, the Wii Remote and Nunchuck literally is based on that whole premise. So we'll see. This was just an experiment. This was just a reason for me to start thinking about Metroid Prime 4 and the new mouse controls that are coming to us soon now that the Switch 2 is out and in our hands, and I have one. It's exciting. I promise you this is all actually very exciting stuff, but these experiments and testing how to play Cyberpunk with the mouse controls was very helpful for me, considering I'm not sitting at a desk, I'm sitting in a living room on a couch, leaning back and relaxing. So these are some of my thoughts. I'll be curious to hear from you guys if you have any interest in even playing Metroid Prime 4 with the mouse controls. If you do have interest, how does it work with your setup? How do my experiments and the different positions you saw me in compare to how your setup is? Your setup or your level of comfort might be very different than mine, so it might be a lot easier for you to play with mouse controls, sitting at a couch or a chair, wherever you are, compared to me and my setup, and also my preferences. We might also have different preferences. So there's a lot of factors at play. This is not me telling any one person to feel the same way I do or have the same setup I do. This is just to understand how it's different for everyone, and I would hope that it's comfortable to play Prime 4 with mouse controls out of the box easily and comfortably. So talk about your own thoughts and your own setup below. Thank you guys for tuning in, and I'll see you next time.